If this disease were ideally managed, the epidemic would be over in a couple of months, and we would get back to something like normal, something like a V-shaped recovery. And the Asia Pacific is closest to this, though even in the Asia Pacific, it's not going to be quite a V-shaped recovery. It's going to be a much more gradual recovery. But the Asia Pacific, about 2 billion people, and I'm speaking of Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, and Korea, and the ASEAN countries, with the possible exception of Indonesia, are close to having this epidemic under control. And if Indonesia is able to suppress the epidemic, that would really mean that ASEAN +3 +2, or what is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership region, the RCEP region of 15 countries, would be the first place in the world to stop the virus and to be able to open up trade. In that situation, there would be some return to near normalcy of daily life and economics. Not fully. There will be some changes of the economy. We're going to be Zooming and webinars and less travel for sure. We're going to be working from home more than before. We're going to be engaged in e-commerce more than before. This will mean loss of jobs that will stick for office workers, for real estate, for new building construction, for commuting and transport, for some retail shops, which will turn to e-commerce. I think there will be persisting change, some much for the good, I believe, but by and large, it would be possible with the optimum public health policies to bounce back from this. But that's probably not what's going to happen, because we're not in a world of optimum public health policies. We're in a world of Trumps and Bolsonaros. And in the United States, for example, we are approaching depression level conditions. Our headline unemployment rate is 15%, but our actual unemployment rate is probably well over 20%. And for the Americas as a whole, there's an open economic collapse underway. And in many other places, we're not going to get that quick bounce back because we're not getting the quick suppression of the epidemic. So the longer this epidemic goes on, the deeper is the economic crisis. The deeper is the economic crisis, the greater is the economic suffering. The more there is unemployment, the more there are bankruptcies and debts that go into default, people who can't pay their rents, foreclosures, and so on. And this turns from an epidemic crisis to a prolonged balance sheet crisis, a debt crisis, a long-term unemployment crisis. I believe this is what's happening in the United States, and that we are in this now for a long, deep slog, thanks to Mr. Trump and his vulgarities and incompetence. I just don't see a quick bounce back. And for a lot of the world, I fear that this is really what is likely to happen now. And in some places, a huge humanitarian crisis, because people will be hungry, either because they're locked down and can't eat, they've lost their income, they're unemployed and there's no social benefits, there are disruptions of supply chains, many things could happen. But I fear the potential for some very significant humanitarian crises. And if we have more deep climate shocks, as we tend to have every year, this will exacerbate things. And one region to watch, for example, is the Horn of Africa and East Africa, which is facing an unprecedented locust attack on top of the COVID epidemic attack and the economic effects. And remember that the developing countries are losing remittance income, tourist income, and terms of trade deterioration, where commodities prices have declined, especially for the oil exporting or coal exporting countries, because the prices are way down. So I see the crisis not only as not in control from an epidemiological or public health point of view, but also not in control from an economic point of view, not a V-shaped recovery, but turning into a prolonged crisis.